interview you to give a wrap up of the whole thing. You're such a sweetheart.
Hi everyone, good evening. I'm going to have my mask on because I had moved up different places and I feel like it's fine for me to have my mask on. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So we're going to do a session about trust in data or trust in data, and this was a study. It was more or less of a baseline study that I was doing. First and foremost, my name is Mohamed Aaron, and I'm a PhD student in applied machine learning and data science. And I was doing this with my supervisor or the principal investigator, trying to find out before I drill more into the studies and the work that I'm going to do. My work or my dissertation is focusing on incentives and market design. The online platforms, they have become marketplaces. It's no longer about you moving from home to go to a market nearby or a monthly market or rotational market. Now markets are online. And I'm trying to investigate and find out, do the same mechanisms that apply to the physical markets that we used to go to are the same mechanisms that are on online markets? And then in terms of the price mechanism, is it the same or there is a distinction? So this was done as a baseline to inform the next steps on how we can design markets online and platforms to be able to contextualize them, but also to understand whether the dynamics that actually apply in physical markets also apply into online markets. Here you can think of Jumia, you can think of Facebook, marketing, WhatsApp, Twitter, and all those markets. All those are markets that are connecting people that are selling goods and items. So that was part of, that's basically what I'm trying to share here. And I should honestly say that Prof has already said everything that is in my presentation. So basically I think I'll just take 5 or 3 minutes and I'll be done out of this. Because while he was presenting, everything became so clear and he kept on emphasizing the same concepts, the same kind of results that we got at the end of the day. However, some of the things I think is one, the distinction between the previous presentation and my presentation is while the previous one focuses on one, institutions and data institutions, public sector mainly, mine focused on, or we focused on individuals. How do individuals interpret and understand data? Do they even know data? When you talk about data, how do people perceive this? And then, how do they associate different events to data? Is it a negative perspective? Is it a positive perspective? And then when you go deep inside, how do these associations of different people now result into the people that actually collecting and gathering and then sharing and using this information, and then the insights that are coming from these presentations or from this data is what is key in my presentation. So just to start away, this is going to be our outline. And so it's basically, one, the motivation behind everything, and then the research that I will speak about. But also, the key main questions that we're trying to focus on here were what do people associate data with in abstract? When you speak to someone that, I'm collecting data for this purpose and this purpose, how do people perceive this? Of course, there are perceptions that have been created in people that as you share and you download this information, this application on your phone, you're actually selling yourself. Does that therefore affect other data and kind of aspects in life? Okay, and then how do people respond now to specific use cases of data? When Prof was speaking and saying that we're collecting data so that we are able to inform evidence-informed or data-driven kind of decisions in these different cities, I was like, okay, do people even know and understand what is happening? The other day there was a presentation somewhere, and then someone came up and said, you're telling us to collect data, but we are broke. For me, it sounded so weird that sometimes people interpret data in a different perspective. So in the first case, the question that we subjected our participants, which I'm going, for the case of time, we may not get the answers, but we thought to understand, what do people understand when I say data? And just for purposes of time was, people understand data as anything. If I log on to someone's email, if I log on to the phone and put in my password, if I'm sending money, people are just like, it's just any other thing that I can throw over internet and feed in the phone because I just want a thing, but I don't care what happens next. Okay? But to me or to us, from the information that we got, is that data is actually a common good nowadays. It's everything, and every one of us has a stake in this. Okay? When you log onto the platform, you're actually becoming a key participant in that market. Even if it is Facebook, even if it is WhatsApp, you are making a transaction. And is this transaction therefore safe? That's the question that comes in mind. Okay? Because as you share this data with the organization, they're going to share it with other people. We've heard of cases where data is being sold, privacy and safety and data security. So those are some of the things that we thought to understand before we can delve into more kind of perspective. But also we sought to understand, as Steve Prof's presentation, data ecosystems. When somebody speaks of health data, transportation data, crime data, in Uganda we have this project that has been going, I think, for the last 4 years. The camera and all that kind of information is. When this data is being corrected, it's being deposited somewhere on the server, and it's creating a data chamber and a data ecosystem. Government has nationalized and put everything, all our information, in NILA, in internal affairs, on big data chambers. And this data is sitting there someone is sitting on this data, is actually managing it. Therefore, can choose to monopolize, can choose to do anything with this data. So these are some of the things that we thought to understand before we could kind of drill into. So these data processes across different sectors, private, public, non-government or civic, all these others were so key in our kind of our research. Then the other question that we kind of sought to subject these people to was, how do you perceive, or what are some of the negative things that you have come across in the aspect of data? And man, the answers were so interesting. Yes, some of the people understand, as we will see the results later, some of the people understand that you can be sharing data, but you're actually not only sharing your data for the good cause, but you're subjecting yourself to a lot of other negative effects. Misinformation, directed and targeted ads. These are some of the things that now would come into minds of people. So in some of these responses, people say that when I share my data, at the end of the day, I get to receive information that I didn't expect. You told me to sign on this platform and come and attend the event here, but you actually started giving me a lot of other newsletters and ads that I did not subscribe to. And even in your digital and data privacy kind of agreements that I said yes, yes, you did not tell me that this was going to come. So while people were so worried that, yes, we are signing up on so many platforms and we're getting a lot of information that we did not actually request. And then in terms of privacy and cookie requests, we see this all over websites. When you log onto a website, they will tell you before you do this, you won't proceed. But do we kind of find out what is inside these cookies? Because even the cookies have a platform and if you go into the details, you see so many options that are in there. So surprisingly, people didn't understand what all this is about. And then also about data trading. Before I go far, I think it is 3 weeks ago, there was data that leaked somewhere in Uganda about data trading. And this is none other than on the Uganda Stock Exchange platform. Data was being shared and was being harvested by someone because their server in Germany somewhere, and someone was tapping into this data and getting on this portal and getting data about investors and what they're investing in. And you know that is very key, because if I get data about you and your investment, ideally I've entered into your bank account, I have entered into your house, and I know the next move, and I know the next strategy. So if this happens because people do not know how this is going, it becomes very challenging. While we are talking about data-driven and investment in Uganda, but what is the implication after that? Still, when Prof was speaking, I was like, okay, we are trying to implement the PDM, a parish development model. But are we aware who is going to be supervising this data and where it's going to be going? Do people in these areas and villages actually safe that they are not going to be subjected to other negative things that they have not signed up as they kind of review the information and their data? So those are some of the kind of issues that we will try to look. But also, we thought to understand what are some of the potential, whether the participants know the potential for use of data. Now, this also goes back to Prof's presentation, how data can inform decisions and informed decision making and data driven. And whether this is actually spontaneous in a way that you find yourself using it unknowingly, or it is something that you did with an intention. When Prof hinted on what was happening with World Bank and UBOS and government, I was like, okay, but you know this data that they are collecting is actually intended for that particular purpose. But when you go on ground spontaneously to observe, is the lower middle income status there? That would be the question of concern, okay? I'm not going to go into that discussion. But yes, data is of so much importance, though they can come also with kind of different issues that come with. I've already hinted on this, data security, privacy. And as I've already said, when we consent to some of these technical agreements, which are drafted by legal and advocates and all those people, is that which we do not understand, by the way, as consumers, because no one has labored to explain what they mean. The issue is the data that we share and the consent that we give. Sometimes these institutions and corporations and companies use our data more than we consented to. And actually, that's very dangerous, because you can sue that person. Because if I said, I am giving you my date of birth, my age, for passport, to process the passport, and then for you go ahead to use my age to come and say, okay, so we're going to tax this person because he's old, because he's young. This is not what I gave my data for. I gave you to identify me on the passport, okay? I did not give you to come and, again, Prof hinted on this when they are doing tax assessment and tax evaluation. So sometimes we do this and we are actually doing a lot of harm, both to ourselves, but also these people. And what we found out also in our engagement is that the organizations and entities and corporations that are collecting this data, for example, online platforms, Jumia, for them, they know what they are trying to do. It's only us, the data holders in this case, who actually don't know what is going on, but they know what they are doing. Okay? So before I could go on, we thought to explore what's the role of data in all of this. This also is from Prof's kind of presentation. I should tell you again that I saw Prof emptying every part of my presentation. So one, we live in an interconnected world, and this world is informed by two things nowadays, the economics and then the computations. These have been intertwined into one thing. When I say that I'm trying to do a study, or most of my work and research is focusing on incentives and market design, and I'm saying I'm designing or I'm investigating online markets, not physical markets. That means one, I'm trying to use a simple concept of price mechanism that we all maybe have studied somewhere in economics or in some basic commerce, and then computational algorithms. The markets online are run on algorithms. You send me data, then I start sending you recommendations. You go to Jimmy and say, hey, I need a shirt. They say, okay, previous people have viewed this. You just sent me the information, and the algorithm computed from the data that was there and started feeding you a lot of other information. Those are the markets that we are trying to focus on here. And so we are saying, I'm saying that a big data gives markets access to a lot of other data that we have not seen. Okay? So when we are signing onto these platforms, we're actually creating a lot of measurements, because some of these were actually not there. In Prof's kind of study, I would wish to see the results later on. But I kind of look, okay, so some of the indicators, when somebody was asking, some of the indicators may not actually be measured as when we are on online markets or online platforms, because here they ask you every bit and you keep submitting, but some of these in actual life you may not measure them. For example, the geolocations, okay? How long have you last signed in your phone? How many hours did you use your iPhone or your whatever phone during the week? Some of these, I really bet whether Prof can collect this data from some of these people. Not really. But the online platform will collect this to the extent that I can even get your heartbeat. If you're using an iPhone, all this information is in there. So, and that's what we call big data. So this big data gives these corporations and entities a lot of power in the way that they actually influence our culture and our emotions, our way of thinking, because they have been able to get everything in and inside of us. And then the other one is that now data is an asset. This is exactly what Prof is trying to do, to understand what data is there and how it can inform now policy and management. It's an asset that you cannot dispute. While we're in the industrial kind of previous era, we did not have the data, but now we have the data. So I will jump some of these slides just for the purposes of time, but also to not repeat what Prof had already said. So one of the assets that we hold nowadays, in some of the literature, this is called now, it's a supercomputer. We have a supercomputer in our pockets. Globally, around 4.1 billion people or citizens use phones daily. To a range of 3 to 4 hours. And of course, this is a huge consumer market. It's a huge consumer market. And when I say they use, it means that they're actually using this online, because a phone is connected to some satellite somewhere, so it's online. You are in the ecosystem of other users. So this provides an opportunity for us to be able to evaluate and see what is actually happening in most of these consumers that are online. So, and of course, it also helps to kind of figure out how can now the MSMEs, the micro, small, medium enterprises can now harness or kind of harvest this data and then use it for the greater good. So one of them is that because we have emails and chatbots and all these, they help them to be able to program and figure out how they would want to serve their customers well. But also, big data is a major part of the current digital disruption. In my daily work, or in some of the work that I do when I'm away from school, is that I work with the entrepreneurs, and these entrepreneurs are in digital ecosystem. And these entrepreneurs are actually designing products and piloting projects that are in development, software development, and then to develop products and solutions. And one of them, I always interact with them, is one, have you actually found out your ideal customer? Have you defined your ideal customer? Not basically in terms of profit that you're going to get this from this person, but in terms of what they may need, in terms of whether the solution that you're providing to the problem is actually valid. And how do we verify that? We go to the data. Have you done a small survey and have you subjected them to something, some scenarios, and be able to see how it is going? All this comes back to the data. When you look at the logistics, the company, Safe Border, Uber, they're actually collecting a lot of data and they're using it to inform their policy decisions. You imagine Safe Border started way back. When Safe Border started, I think I was already in graduate school, so I interested a lot of myself into understanding how they were working. And at some point, I did some kind of study about consumer supplies, trying to find out how somebody who uses a normal border and then a safe border, do these people benefit in terms of, one, comfort, cost, convenience, okay? But also, if I used the normal border every day and then this person was using safe border, at the end of the month, have you saved? Yeah, and it was found out that people who use safe border actually have a lot of dividend in terms of the cost reduction compared to the other person. So from there, we're able to find out that if, yes, it is possible, then how can Safe Border be able to use this data that they are harvesting to make their application better? And man, if you look at their 2015 or something application and the latest one, you realize there has been a very big fundamental change. And how did they get this? The data they are collecting. They keep seeing what you're doing. You want to borrow airtime? Oh, we can put airtime there. You actually want delivered air? We can put there. You want a shop? We can put there. All this information has been able to unveil. Then in terms of trade and universal currency, blockchain and cryptocurrency technology. Of course, this is something that when you mention it, people start having glitches in the head. Be like, what are you talking about? But it is something that is inevitable. We cannot do away with it. It is here and it's going to lure us a lot of time. Yeah. So in terms of what basically I wanted to speak about, that was just a preamble about how it came to trust. Do actually people have trust when they are sharing data with some of these organizations, both public and private? When Prof would go to field, I don't know whether people would actually trust and say, this person has not come to tax us. So do people have trust? And has this trust been built both by civil society and government and private, that when you give us your data, we are going to use it for the greater good, not to tax you? I make a quote, or I pick a quote from someone who says Singapore, though it's a relatively developed country, but we could borrow something. In there, they have instilled in people that when you give us your data, we're actually going to use it to give you a service. And yes, when government was coming to collect data for national IDs, they were like, we want to serve you better. We want to serve you better, want to know, and we want to be able to prescribe you when you come to a medical center. We identify you very well. That's the purpose. So if that trust has been instilled in people, then data becomes so important. And also, when trust has been instilled in people and private organizations, then even the private organizations that are collecting this data use it for the purpose they have got this data for, because they will not have cases of an organization has sold data for this particular purpose. We heard of a case, I think, of Safe Border, where they alleged that they were selling data somewhere. So if there is trust, then even these organizations would say, oh, we were entrusted with this data, so we cannot sell it to some other organization. So in here, the questions that we kind of need to ask ourselves is, what is our level of trust with data to government, enterprises, and corporations? Are we sure that our data will be put to good use? And then number two, do we even care? Do we even know that trust in data exists as citizens? And then number three, what does it mean to trust anyone? In terms of data, what does it mean to trust anyone? And yes, some of these questions were so interesting. Is that trust, to understand and to put context to those questions, trust is between data holders, data contributors, and then the data users. Because there are three parties in data: the person who is holding data, the person who wants to keep and use this data, and then the person who is going to use this data. Because when you correct this data and when UBOS collects and makes these household surveys, at the end of the day, they say when they have cleaned and published the report, they say, now the data is open to public for use. So that means, one, There was me who contributed data from my household. There was UBOS that went and processed this data, and then now it is releasing to whoever, including the whole world, to come and pick this data and use it. So the trust is between also these three parties. If you have trusted you with my data, whoever is going to use it should also use it in a trustworthy manner, so that at the end of the day, it delivers the whole emphasis. But also, trust is between data ecosystems. There's what we call, there's a concept of data institution. And I tend to look at policy, by the way, as a data institution, because most of the work of policy is on data and digital literacy, and all these rotate around data. So these data ecosystems have a lot of data they are collecting. Do we trust them? And let me tell you guys, or ladies and gentlemen in this room, is that if someone has a lot of something, they may be tempted to monopolize it. And we know the effects of monopoly. You can do a lot of other things with it. And then also, along the way, when you monopolize something, then an ethical issue can come up. And therefore, how do you control this? So in terms of understanding how people understand it and share it, we sought to understand how data is shared, or what is the data sharing journey. When data is first pulled somewhere, someone sits somewhere, say at NILA, at Internal Affairs, collects all this information and puts it in a server. And then he's the owner of it. When you want it, sometimes in most of these government entities, they cannot give you this data, even when you're a researcher. They will toss you up, down, here, because he's a monopolist. He has owned the data. He collected it from you, but now has it and he can't give it to you. And then there's a component of, now the other principle is decentralizing the data, which means that when I collect my data and I give it to you, you actually do not own it. You're just a trustee of my data. some of that information can be done out of it. Then in terms of standards to enable us to protect, activate, and share data, that still comes back to the data governance that I've talked about earlier on. And then in terms of data mobility, sometimes when we share our data, it actually crosses borders. It goes to Kenya, some Prof talked about this. It goes to Kenya, goes to Tanzania, but also finds way in UK and in South Africa. And by the way, when you looking at some of these data privacy and privacy policies, most of them miss the component of, in case I'm going to transfer this data to another destination or border, how will I handle this? So this is missing in everything that we see here. Because your idea is supposed to, if you collect data within Uganda, have this within the jurisdictions of Uganda. If it goes into another border, then that's a different story. So that's something that we looked to see whether people understand, and there was nothing like a concept that they could understand in here. Then, in terms of open banking, I said that the phones that we have are super computers that we have in our pockets. But also, they have become mobile banks and digital banks. Therefore, when we are collecting this data, how can we make sure that we're actually going to borrow some of the concepts from mobile money, online markets, to be able to give data that is very informative? One of them is to make sure that we ensure that our customers know our data practices. When we're collecting data about money and currencies, we make it as open as possible so that people understand. But also, we strive to put data collection in context. This is what Prof was trying to say. How can we contextualize the data that we are collecting? Because not every data will serve the purpose, and therefore you end up collecting data that is not important to you. So having a context of what you're collecting, of what data you're going to use, is very key. But also telling people about things that they care about more. We are in a generation of us, the young people, who are still young, below 30 or below 20, 25. We tend to focus where we have interest in. So if I'm going to collect data about youth, what do youth want to hear? And what are some of the platforms and channels they would want to collect data from? I think WhatsApp and Twitter would be the best platform for you to get this data. So knowing that also is very key and helps you to focus on whatever you're trying to do. But also, the big part, which also involves Prof's kind of baseline study, government support. How is government going to support, and how is it putting it in the NDP and in the planning process to make sure the data ecosystems are actually being protected, instead of just having our data scooped and kept somewhere without government knowing what is happening. So how can government support, sensitize the people, educate them about the role of data and how these organizations should use their data? But also encouraging people to always not just share their data anyhow, but seek to, from these organizations, to give them information on how they're going to use their data. But also paying attention also to the role of civil society, what policy is doing. It's doing a lot of digital work, I've said before. So government should be able to work with some of these civil society organizations to make sure that whatever work and kind of interventions and projects they are running are able to inform not only the participants or the beneficiaries, but also the national policy and organization. So in summary, I just want to re-echo the kind of markets or the kind of state that we are in now. We are in a state where the economy is run into three aspects. There is a state, which is the government, there are the individuals, and then the companies. So for us to be able to participate in mostly the digital ecosystem or the digital markets, these three players should be able to come together and have policies. And one of them is the GDPR, General Data Protection Policy kind of regimes and guidelines, which are able to set and guide everyone that is going to use the data and put actions and acts and kind of policies in place. So, and then the individuals, of course, we are the owners of data. We are everything. So everything rotates around us. But also the companies and organizations that are using our data, they are collecting it and they're keeping this as trustees of our data. Okay? So I just want to pause, maybe if there's a question or something, before I can flash to show you the results that were very interesting from the study that we did. Yes, any questions? Or I could go through and then we do the questions later. Okay, so let me continue. So this is basically the kind of the baseline study that we did, which was to inform whatever we are trying to do, incentives and online market design. And this was done with over 100 participants, which was also more into exploratory. It was subjecting people to different case studies and data uses, and then trying to find out how people interpret and use this data. So our study was basically qualitative in nature and exploratory. So it aimed at generating, one, understanding and exploring how the public or how public perceives data, but also exploring topics about, one, the attitudes that we give data when we collect data or when we sign into platforms, and also understanding the context, how we collect and use the data for ourselves, but also for organization. That was basically the research was about. It was guided by 3 objectives. One, to understand the spontaneous view of use of data, and then also to understand the positive and negative impacts about how public perceive data, and also the attitudes, the opinions, and then the data use, how they are formed within organizations and entities. And so these study objectives were basically to build, one, to be able to understand, has the society and community shifted the traditional understanding of data to the modern era or the digital era understanding, but also then in terms of the positives and negatives, are they building or destroying our communities? When you look at how the misinformation and the information that is shared on online platforms and social media, some of this is actually not building the communities. It's actually endangering our culture. And then in terms of the attitudes, is it changing the behaviors for the better, or it's actually endangering our culture? So those were some of the objectives. The methodology also was a multi-stage or phased way. One, we subjected them to different phases, which were 3 phases. And then we were asking about, they were being guided by the different 3 questions. And then the method was online focus group discussion, then presentation, and then also online focus group discussions. At the end of the day, we started with a sample of around 120, but all through the different stages, only 30 people were able to complete all the 3 stages. So that means there was a lot of kind of attrition and dropout along the way when we were doing this study in the process. I'll jump this kind of slide. So we subjected them to different case studies, one on transport, on basically culture and attitude, and then in terms of finances and money, but also on general biological data, how they use and perceive this data. So these were the case studies that we're giving them. And summary findings is that we find that people attach a lot of spontaneous attitudes towards data. People understand data as just anything stored anywhere, that I don't know what happens. And then in terms of the attitudes is that people perceive data and kind of the aspects in a way that if I was online and they trolled me, then I hate that platform. And therefore I wouldn't want to share my data on that platform. And then if I shared my data and it was used for a wrong purpose, then I wouldn't want to associate with that organization. So those are some of the key kind of findings that we found from the study that were very useful for us to design our markets that we're trying to work on. So in terms of just a snapshot of what one of our participants says is that, I do not know the full context of what data means, but it's basically information that is gathered, extracted, and mined for their company. So people think that when you share your information and go use your ATM with this bank, they're basically trying to understand how you're withdrawing your money and how you use it, and maybe they can target ads to you. So the public does not actually appreciate the whole ecosystem of data and does not understand what data means in that perspective. And then also we had another one who said that when we share our data, especially making online registration, downloading apps on social media, then we end up actually reveal a lot about ourselves. And this can be very dangerous because people will understand us and will target a lot of things toward us. And then in terms of how people perceive this is that, one, when I talk about data, according to our sample, people understood data as personal data, my age, my date of birth, period, nothing else. And then the other one was, one, they do not look at data in terms of informing policy and decision making. They just look at data as date of birth, That's all. I do not need any other information. Or if I sign on to the platform, I'm just giving my email and it's just to receive information, and that's all. I do not know what happens later. So, of course, that is very dangerous in a way that if you're now talking about data-driven, then people will not understand you. They'll be like, what is this guy talking about? So that, which is a very big challenge now. Okay. Then in terms of the attitudes and the perceptions about what data, how people perceive data, one is that while data can deliver a lot of direct and indirect benefits, people seem not to appreciate these benefits. They seem to look at data as just, I just need to sign on and be able to be allowed into the meeting, but what happens next, I don't care. I don't know whether I can actually benefit more by giving in my data, because you realize that, as I said earlier on in the privacy cookies and requests, there's a platform online called GNR, which actually helps you to trade your data, and then you're able to earn from that. But people seem not to appreciate, and they had no idea. But also, when you compare the previous era and the current era, when we did not have, for example, Google Maps, you know, the hassle would go through to get some of the directions. I can appreciate where I work, there's a startup that is trying to kind of put everything, every geographical location in Uganda on a map. It's called Map Uganda something. And they are doing a lot of work in terms of identifying every location and every direction in Uganda. So you can imagine people who will come after us or generations later, they'll find everything that you may need on a map. So that is something that I would look at very key, because if you're able to locate every health center in Uganda and every kind of service, then that becomes very key for you. But also, for web presence, if you have a startup or a business organization, being able to put your data up there online and know your customer is very key, which we find that most of the participants actually do not appreciate what that can do for them. Then in terms of the attitudes, what people perceive data for is that we categorize all the kind of responses that we got from there in 4 dimensions. One, competent, ethical, non-ethical, and then incompetent. And we find that big banks use information and data to make their services better. Because now, when you go to, I think, StanChart, when you're opening the one they call a digital life account, you do not need to go to the bank, neither do you need to send them a passport photo. But everything is run by an algorithm somewhere. Take a pic of your national ID and then take a selfie, and we'll verify your information and we'll know you're the same person. The banks are exploiting that, and they're using it for the greater good. But when you look at also the SMEs that are kind of developing most of these small solutions and applications, they are kind of taking advantage of the data dividend, and they are transforming this into a business. In where I work and some of other businesses that I do is that I do a lot of data analytics and data programming and algorithms. So these help us to track a lot of information that you can actually make a lot of insights from. There's what we call the business intelligence. This used to be statistics a long time ago. Me, when I did statistics, there was nothing like business intelligence. But nowadays, this is what is running the world. Every corporation or government is using data to kind of do a lot of work. Then we find out, or our responses or participants say that some of the unethical behaviors and why they have sometimes do not share their data is that when it comes to campaign and politics, politicians are using our data for the wrong good. So people are worried, when I share my data, is it not going to people to come to me and start disturbing me to vote for them? Is it not going to create a lot of kind of conflict that I support NRM and I don't support NUP? So sometimes people are worried. They're like, who are you and why are you collecting my information and why do you need it? So we find that as a challenge in terms of being able to sieve out, to get data for the greater good and for a wrong purpose. Yeah, I'm just about to finish. I just want to finish with a few things and then we'll be good to go. In terms of what elements of different data use cases most people influence or how the public perceive is that we kind of grade it into 2 binary decisions. One, positively received and then negatively received. And we find that people associate a lot of data and are okay to share data with smart technology and mobile phones because they know when they buy this information and they buy a phone and has a yoga app or something, he will benefit at the end of the day. If my iPhone is able to measure how many steps I've made in a day, ideally I can convince you that I've done exercises even when I'm not trained. So that's, people say that's an advantage to me, and I would feel okay to share a lot of information with iPhone because I know it's going to help me. Then in terms of the negativity is that people are scared of, there's so many ads that are going to pop up on my phone and in my email, and every time I open my PC, then the thing is popping up. So that targeted advertising, people are scared of it. And of course, government for tax assessment, people are so worried that if I share data with you, you're actually going to use it to charge me a lot of money at the end of the day. So that's of course very dangerous. And then somehow we find that tech-related education and then kind of ride-hailing apps or fintech technology is favored somehow in terms of medium. Because if I have my phone and I can be able to borrow airtime when I'm stuck, that is very key for me. If I'm stuck somewhere and I do not have enough money and I just want to use the 3K or the 5K on my mobile money to take a safe border, it will have saved me a lot of battle in terms of paying 10K to move from somewhere to somewhere. So people associate these and rank them so positively. So I think this becomes very key for whoever is trying to focus on data to understand how people perceive data in terms of the aspects. And then this was through 12 case studies that were kind of subjecting them to. However, in terms of the negativity, people are scared that if I sign on your platform and you take my data, then I would be okay for the companies or corporations to use this data, but I am scared they're going to send me ads and they're going to make a lot of money from me. And they're already rich, and me, I'm poor. So what the hell am I trying to do? That's a bad one. But what's the whole business of me sharing my data? So someone was so scared and says that I'm okay to share my data, but I'm scared that these guys are going to make a lot of money from me and they're not paying anything back to me. Then in terms of the ride-hailing apps, is that when I want to download the Safe Border app on my phone, but then why do they want to access my location all the time? Isn't that dangerous to me? So people are worried, like, enable Safe Border to access your location. No. I will turn it on when I want to get the border, not every time. So people are worried about this geolocation tracking in terms of how we use them. So in terms of concluding remarks is, one, at least 50% of the people that we engaged understand what data means. And then they also know which institutions are holding their data and how somehow how they use them. The key ones is, one, the tech companies, national and government entities, and also civil society organizations are holding a lot of data and people know how to use it, and for policy kind of analysis. So in terms of the appendix, I lay out some of the case studies and how we're trying to do them in different aspects, and then kind of the potential uses of data is what I'm basically sharing in the appendix. So you see on a smartphone company, people say if I'm sharing my images and people are able to track and they'll be able to find out the crime and all that kind of stuff. And then also for bank kind of banking, that's like the one I talked about previously. Then in terms of police or crime prevention, it's the algorithm, and then the images that we are sharing, being able to help people to probe and get more information about what is happening. And then the tech in education, and then ride-hailing. And social media, of course. That was very key, and it was one of our case studies that we subjected people to. And it was very revealing in that while we are actually trying to do a lot of likes on Twitter, on Facebook, these corporations are understanding who we are. They'll be like, oh, so you like this content? We will punch you with a lot of this content. So that's called content moderation. If you like something, then they will keep bringing in your feed that particular information that you tend to like. And of course, that helps them because they will be able to, therefore, direct a lot of ads to you in that particular perspective. And that's kind of the dynamics behind online advertising and the economics and the algorithms that are behind that. So that's basically that. I also give some kind of context in terms of when you're transferring data from different countries, how you could make that better or easier in simplest language, but also how you could draft the privacy policy that is so clear and open to you using plain language and plain English, and not that kind of technical jargon that is not understood by everyone. And then in terms of if you want to use the data for other marketing, how you draft your kind of policies so that people understand it. And yeah, basically that's basically that. So this is some of my future work that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to look at incentives and data and how this comes into the marketplace. And the marketplace I'm talking about in this case is online platform, social media, WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook, how this comes into play and whether actually people appreciate if they are sharing their information there. Of course, this is very key because I would say that these platforms are influencing a lot of our society. It's what we call data modulation. Of course, this has become culture to us in a way that if I'm speaking, if I'm making any conversation, I say, I saw this thing on WhatsApp, and man, it was so, it aroused my interest. So if we are doing a lot of references to that content that is actually not modulated by anyone, then our culture is becoming different. That means when I'm speaking, I make a lot of references to social media. Instead of making references to published work, to research work, I'm making references to a meme somewhere. So that influences our culture. So I'm trying to find out whether that has one negative implication on our traditional culture, or it actually enhances or makes our culture better. So that's part of my work that I'm actually trying to do in all my study and all my work that I'm doing after that. Thank you for your attention, and yeah, we'll welcome questions, suggestions, especially in terms of one, this research, but also in other kind of research work. So if there are areas that you think we can focus on, we can point our direction to in terms of online marketplaces, incentives, data, online market and price mechanism, in terms of all this, I would welcome such suggestions and comments. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Emmanuel. I also work as a researcher, and I think some of the things I've been pondering about is giving back to the community or the people that we get the information from. What we learn in research is that the respondent are the hub of the knowledge that we pick from. However, there is a gap between what we pick from them and giving back to them what the results are and the implications on what it means for themselves and other aspects of their lives. And so I appreciate you are sharing this in this kind of forums, and most often we want to target the policy actors. But then what do you think will be the most appropriate way of taking back this information to the people that we've spoken to, or the likes of them who need to understand some of the implications of consenting, which may not be like what you've just consented, but then your data will be used for other purposes. And I'm saying this because I've had an experience where we had some enumerators to go and collect some data from smallholder farmers in some areas in Masaka. One, the farmers refused, and two, they told them never to come back because they are tired of answering questions, and directly they don't see the impact of the information that they give, right? So how do we reconcile that in the sense of picking information from those that are the hub of the knowledge, and given that for us we are able to make a lot of sense in it? How do we get back to them, but also the likes of them, and how these results, can benefit them? Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. Is the mic on? My question is about the respondents for the study. In the morning sessions, we looked at inclusivity. I was wondering how inclusive your respondents are, or if you don't mind, the details of who you actually talked to, because the responses could be from people who are privileged, and maybe it's not as you didn't go into the details of the people, maybe the widows, the persons living with disabilities, basically the minoritized people. How inclusive was this baseline? And then the other thing is how, related to his question, would you think of maybe what dissemination ways are you thinking of to have these results get back to the everyday person? We've been talking about memes. Are you thinking of breaking down these results to what an everyday youth on WhatsApp can actually access? Maybe a PowerPoint, maybe a link to the results. How best, I'm actually giving you suggestions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So now my comment is about to people refusing to sign in for some platforms, maybe because they are fearing that those platforms will use their data to advertise. So for me, really, what is your opinion on that? Because for me, I don't think there is a problem with advertising. When I join a platform and it is used for, my data is used for advertising, maybe if I have advertised of something which I want, for example, I always see this thing of iSent on being advertised on Facebook, and many people have borrowed money from iSent, but yet it was advertised on Facebook. And I hope now that to that person who borrowed money from iSent, which was advertised on Facebook, it means that ad has added value on him or her. So I don't hope people would refuse to sign for platform in fear that these platforms will make adverts on their thingy. Thank you.
Yes, I will start with the last one. There's a very interesting advertising when I sign onto the platform and they start sending me naked people. Is that really advertising that I would want when I'm at work? Even when I open my PC to flash a presentation and then you see people, that's kind of the data that I'm actually talking about. Advertising in its own sense would be fine. But also, when I'm signing on this platform, are you eager to tell me that, Aaron, we are going to give you more information and we are going to advertise to you? And then I consent, I say, okay, I'm actually okay with this kind of ads. That's where my point of concern comes in. Giving me information that I'm actually not interested in, that actually distracts my attention, that actually is against my will, is what we are talking about here. That's number one. Then in terms of the dissemination, one, this is still a study in development, so we have not really disseminated it so wide, and because it is to inform the bigger study, which is about incentives and online market design. Because for these markets depend on data and platforms. So we thought to understand, do people actually understand what data is? And if I'm to design a market, if I'm to design a platform that is going to use data as kind of the commodity, the medium of exchange, then how do I go about it? So we wanted to find out how people perceive data. So in terms of dissemination, we have no kind of plans to disseminate unless we finally publish a paper, then we can disseminate that and contain everything there. Then in terms of how inclusive we were in our target group, we divided our participants into main categories, the young and old, because we wanted to compare the traditional, the older people, how they would perceive data, and then the generation that is on, us who have used the kind of, we have found this tech kind of era, the smartphones and all that kind of stuff. So, and the reason was basically to do a binary kind of intersection. do people who are older consider data to be important online, or they find it inconveniencing? And then the young people, how are they ready? Are they actually ready to take a data to harvest and get a lot of benefit from it? That's why we divided our kind of participants into kind of main distinction. But we selected our participants from rural areas, from urban areas, but also from the tech sector and then the civil society, because we wanted to kind of get expert knowledge, not basically traditional kind of understanding, but also the expert knowledge about them. And interestingly, we find that older people actually consider data very important compared to the younger generation. The young generation is more interested in a different thing, not looking at data for a value. And then, how would I reconcile different interests? One, it all comes back to what I said: data holders, data contributors, data users. And then again, number two, putting your data collection in context. You spoke about the event in Masaka where people are collecting data, and someone says, I'm not going to give you my data because you've always coming here and you take my data and you never come back. One, it could be that this person is collecting a lot of information that is not helping them, and they actually do not understand which data to collect. So that every time you go there, you come back, because this scenario can happen, Prof can testify. You can go to field and collect information, and you realize you collected the wrong information, and then you have to go back to the same person to get the data. So one, putting this in context, I think, is very key when you're going to collect data. And then finding out who is my key kind of data holder, which person do I need to get the data on, and which type of data do I need to get. And then explaining explicitly very well in simple language why you need this data. When it comes to kind of projects to deal with smallholder farmers, because some of these people do not actually understand this language, you need to kind of break it down in a language or find an analogy that you can use to get this information from. One, that could be against their will, but you need to explain why you need to collect this information. Okay, so I think that revolves around three perspectives or three principles: data holders, data contributors, and then data users. And then the context of why you're collecting this information is very key. Yes, there was a question online. Oh, okay, how do you make, this is exactly what I hinted on. You draft it one in very short and clear sentences, in a way that they can be summarized in 2 keywords. But also you leave out the technical kind of legal language out. One, it would be, you would ask, if I was collecting data about anything online platform, I would ask my people, what interests you more? When you're sharing your data, what interests you more? And then someone would say, I actually do not want to fill so many inputs before I can go to the hint of submit. So my privative policy would be, we actually collect data that we need. If we are calling you for a meeting, your email and your name to identify you is enough. So you just need 2 fields. And then I would say, I am going to use your data for only the meeting purpose and planning. If beyond the meeting, you are free to withdraw and actually delete your data from my platform. That would be my privacy policy. Because what am I interested in? To attend the meeting. And then the next, how am I going to get the meeting link? Via my email. That's all. That's what is so interesting for me. So I think we just need to find out who our data contributors are and what they consider important to them. That can help us to design our privacy policies very well. According to me, that's what I think can help address this other kind of legal language that we always encounter online. Yeah, but also being open. If you're taking data and you're going to use it for only organizing an event, then why do you want to use it for other purposes? If you want to get back and collect more data, then be open and tell them, you know what, we need more information to make a decision here. So I think also being open is very key when you're designing your privacy policies, and not basically collecting, but also making sure that you're collecting the information that you need, not just having a lot of data in your silos and servers that is not actually helping you at all. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Yes, proceed.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. Mine is just a comment. from the presentation, especially on the line of social media marketing or online marketing. The comment I'd like to give is that the online system is designed with an inherent incentive for the user. I'll just give an example. Facebook. Of course, here in Africa, we still have social cultural interactions more than in America, more than in Europe. So in for example, that gap, people you find are stressed. People don't have other people to talk to. When you are living in Europe, in America, you may be sharing. You are here, and the person is in the next room, but you never meet. You can never know who the person. There's no kind of interaction. So when it comes to social media like Facebook, it bridges that gap. Someone can be there, take picture. Another person is there. They laugh, they share. Like now, you're as if you are in a community. So now, as you do that, you are addressing the problem of interaction which you have. But at the same time, so that is the primary reason why you share and all that. But as you do so, you are giving data. Now, when you leave Facebook, because it's one of the highly, important, yeah. Then now you go to, for example, like this online, like Amazon is also one of the richest. Still, it was basically to save time on going to the supermarket to buy things. You can move here, you go to a supermarket, you are looking for Blue Band, you're looking for bread, you're looking for this, you walk around, you cannot get this, you walk to the other side, you cannot find what you want, you come to this side. But now they created an incentive that you can sit somewhere on the computer, just look at this product, you click a button, even they give a description, they show you what. It is easy. It is an incentive already that is already provided. So meaning that inherently, people need to use these platforms. Nobody forces you to use TikTok. But by the mere fact that you want to be entertained, you find yourself subscribing to TikTok. By the mere fact now, like WhatsApp, already people need to know what is happening. It's a people just by default, because of this, you find there is already an incentive that you need to be there. If you say, I don't want to be there, you'll eventually be left out. For example, if you have like Gmail, once you have Gmail, you have Google Forms, you have a YouTube account, everything is there. Because that is a communication channel that is available now. So by default, you find that because of the incentive already inherent in those systems, people are using them. And but nobody forces you. If you say, okay, now you just kick out email, kick out WhatsApp, kick out to all these accounts, you'll be isolated. They will send an invitation for this meeting, you'll not know. How will they get you? Because you don't have an email. So those inherent incentives are designed by these corporate companies to be able to trap, of course, you to subscribe to them, so that in the process, you automatically give away your data. So, and of course, their reliance on developing within these algorithms, they invest a lot of money. Silicon Valley in the US is one of the richest tech, because they give people to do this work, develop algorithms, so that they can be able to intelligently use your data to be able to help you make it. And by the way, maybe just to end, because of time, here where we are now, we are still at, they would say, level 1. But where we are heading, we're actually heading to the what we call the nano technology level, where you have a chip based in your body, which monitors your heartbeat. For example, we have had lunch. Someone took matoke, took chicken. Did you know that your body did not need that? But if you have something which monitors that, by this time you only need, there was this gonja, there was rice. Don't touch on the meat. It alerts you on your phone. Then you are able to eat what you want. We have been given water, but we're not sure that our bodies needed water now. We have taken, if we had something which monitors our water level, you say, you now need only 2. And then so now that is the level where we are heading. And once we have headed that level, someone will be controlling now your heartbeat, your heart rate, how much your body digests, or, there will be a lot of changes that are happening. And the way it is brought with incentives. For example, if you can know how much water you should take, it even monitor your blood pressure, it even monitor your cholesterol levels in the body. It will, automatically it has benefits. But as you subscribe, you enroll, it definitely, it takes away your freedom. So that means, especially in the research side of it, you need to look at those inherent incentives which make people subscribe without any force, willingly. And eventually, they're able to do what? They are able to supply your data. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I think that's something that we're looking at very carefully in terms of the research that we're doing. What incentives, and these are kind of self-reported incentives of why people sign on to these platforms. But also after kind of what we call self-recruitment into the platform, then what happens there is very key, and we are considering that, because that's what is helping us to inform the markets that we're talking about, the market design kind of mechanism that whatever we're trying to do in this research. Yeah, thank you. I am told our time is up. But I would love to interact with everyone here more and get more insight and any comments as regards to this work. Thank you so much for your time and for your patience.